welcome to the Firm Optimist Conversation. I'm Micheline Corr, and today I'm privileged to be joined by Kenneth Carroll from Carroll Foodservices in Ireland and the Chief Executive of BaxterStorey, Noel Mahony from London. Hi guys.
Micheline.
Great to see you. Ken, how are you? How have you been coping in lockdown? Are you watching many box sets?
Well, we are, yeah. My days are full. I've been doing a lot of work in the past few weeks to make sure we've new protocols in place and to protect our staff and customers. And we launched a new meal delivery service for businesses as a direct response to the pandemic. So that's progressing well.
Very busy. And Noel, how are you in lockdown in London? How's Rosie and the family? I imagine your home is a busy hub.
I'm not sure who's coping better, actually, Rosie and the family or me. I think it probably took a bit of adjusting. I'm normally, like most hospitality people, I'm normally out and about, long days, social animals, and to be effectively in lockdown can take its toll. But yeah, it's been okay, actually. Everybody's adjusted very well. Thank you very much.
For millions of people across the globe, the future of work has changed forever. Work rituals are transforming, and we all adapt to this home working from unconventional environments. I'm here at my kitchen table talking to you today. During this session, we're going to have a conversation about the new demands for corporate catering and hospitality. Noel, I feel that we're all very stretched and making decisions with new information on a daily basis. Tell me, how has this crisis impacted you as a leader?
Well, significantly, Micheline. I mean, at the same time it was going on in Ireland, the hospitality sector has truly been in the eye of the storm of lockdown, in the UK particularly. So that week of sort of Patrick's weekend, if you will, that infamous week in March, I remember sitting, watching, knowing sites were closing down around us at a huge speed. And I remember sitting having a cup of tea actually with Richard Corrigan and another friend of mine, John Nugent. And at the time, I think we were in a little bit of shock. We really, really sure what was about to come. We've all started to adjust to that now. But we as a business, we were rolling into this year as BaxterStorey with revenues of about $500 million. So, relatively large size. We've been very fortunate over the years to continue in growth mode. And when the music stops and you lose something like 80 to 85% of your revenues within a week, you have to work damn hard to try and reduce your cost base and still communicate well with your people and your clients throughout. So it's nothing we've experienced before. So there's an argument to say our crisis plans have been tested to the full. They've worked pretty well. However, to some extent, we're making it up as we go along. And I think the whole hospitality sector has.
And how do you contrast the approach to COVID-19 in Ireland and the UK? How do the government supports for employees compare?
Well, I think at the start, looking from the outside in, I live just outside London, but looking from the outside in, I think I have been hugely interested in how the Irish government have led this from the start with clear communication, a clear plan throughout, and very, very, very measured in their approach. I think the UK started off on the back foot. It was really confusing as to what we were supposed to do. Do you go to a restaurant, not go to a restaurant? Do you go to a pub, not go to a pub? There was that week of real uncertainty. I think they're playing catch up now, and unfortunately the press are having their piece of the cake as well. So I think a slow start for the UK. They did play catch up to an extent. For the hospitality sector, the furlough scheme has really held the hospitality sector together, if I'm honest. I don't know how much you know, Micheline, but the hospitality sector in the UK represents 3.2 million jobs. That's 10% of the UK workforce and contributes about 5% to UK GDP. So it is a significant employer. So they had to step in, and that scheme has been incredibly helpful, at least for now.
Ken, from an Irish perspective, what would you like to see the government provide by way of support to the industry? The Restaurants Association, the hotel businesses are out there very clear with what they need in terms of zero VAT, abolishment of rates and a continuation of the wage subsidy. But I haven't seen any lobbying from the general catering community. What changes would you like to see brought in?
Well, I'd firstly like to say, echo Noel's comments. I think our government has responded extremely well to the pressures that they've been put under in managing the timescales and the public's expectations, and that was through very, very clear-cut communications. Many of the catering industry's needs are mirrored by the representations of other industry bodies, such as the RAI, the IHF, and the Save Our Restaurants campaign. And I know many of us have been in close contact with Adrian in the RAI throughout. So we are very much hand in glove as an industry. Also, I'd have to shout out about that IBEC and the SFA and Enterprise Ireland have been hugely responsive and supportive of businesses throughout. So there's been a wide range of supports. The supports that are and will continue to be important for business owners are supports for cash flow, such as the warehousing of revenue payments, the wage subsidy that you mentioned, and the new Restart grant available from tomorrow for SMEs. I do think that our industry sector is going to have to invest quite heavily in remodeling facilities in order to reopen, and we'll need supports in place for these costs, even though in many instances and in most instances, we are guests in a client's premises. So that's a client conversation that needs to happen. The caveat here is that we need to balance our investment with how long these changes are going to be needed for. How long is COVID going to be around, and what is the new reality, and how much we actually have to invest in that new reality. In terms of the COVID payments directly through the social welfare system, I'd like to see more clarity about that, because payments are made to people who were laid off or personally elected to go on social welfare rather than stay on the books in companies. I think there's a very clear distinction to be made there. And this will increasingly prove difficult when we're trying to get people back to work. The 350 euros per week was more enticing than staying, for those who were on lower pay, than staying on the books.
Yes. Noel, you mentioned that week there in March when your businesses were closing, your client companies were closing and sending people to home working. And I know you mentioned a financial client to me who had 9,000 people on site. What are your expectations about the percentages of people that are going to come back into those office buildings?
I think it changes depending on the location, Micheline. So London, where we probably have about 50% of our overall UK business. London was hit first, and then it moved out to the regions outside of London. And I think there's the potential that London might come back later than others. And that's predominantly to do with public transport. The Mayor of London has spent years trying to drive vehicles out of London, and therefore, people are completely reliant on public transport, be it bus or the London Underground, etc., as their primary method of commuting around. Post-COVID, it has been recommended that we don't use public transport in London. So there's a real uncertainty at this moment in time, unless there's a vaccine found, as to what London in particular might look like. But to go back to your question, some of the bigger organisations that we're dealing with, some of the financial institutions, etc., if they have something like 9,000 people normally on site in London, which is very big, they will now end up doing something like, they're talking about maybe having 40% of the workforce back by November, 40 in total. So you're talking, what's that for now, 4,000 people? And I think there's been, in many cases, there's a question mark now over whether large institutions need and require these big office buildings to house all of their people anymore. Because whilst those in the hospitality industry may not like working from home, I am sure there are others who it suits very well. So I think there will be a change. we're looking at next year, and as we roll into next year, we're thinking we might reset in our workplace sector, at least, at about 70% of the population overall, because I do feel that this will change. Now, people are creatures of habit, Micheline, so they will go back to old ways. But I think many have found, particularly the commute piece, really beneficial to be able to work from home.
When you were here in Dublin with us at the Firm Afternoon Tea Talk, Noel, some months ago, at that time you were talking about the agile worker and delivered in models. Have you accelerated the delivery side of what you're doing?
Yeah, little did I know then as to what was going to happen. Otherwise, I would have got onto it quicker. Yes, we have. Yeah, we're talking to companies now about how actually we might be able to deliver to their home worker. And we've done a couple of trials. They've been interesting, particularly around the distribution element of it, because you're relying on somebody else to distribute that product, particularly if it's a fresh product. But there is certainly something in there, and we believe that that will play a part, maybe not as significant part as we might think. I think what's going to be more important is that the employees, when they go to their workplace, feel very safe, feel that the food has been produced in a safe manner, and that they are not at risk. And they're the things, like Kenneth just said, that we've spent most of our time working on in various client premises, etc.
Ken, you have several sites open at the moment in pharmaceutical manufacturing and in care facilities. When do you see your other customers coming back? Is the 8th of June a significant date?
That's a very difficult question, Micheline. I think that's a work in progress. With not a huge amount of clarity at the minute, I think it's fair to say. A couple of our business and public sector clients are hoping to open over the next few weeks, but what I can say with some certainty is that our educational clients won't be returning until September at least. And that would be a pretty significant part of our business. But with every day brings a little bit more clarity. And yesterday we heard of another site opening in 2 weeks' time. And that brings us into a little bit more of a hope situation. But government departments, I haven't got a clarity yet from those. But they are, you see the movements coming that they are planning to reopen, but we haven't got a specific date yet.
I think we're all talking about safety and creating that safe space for people to come back into the work environment. Chris Chidley from Compass has been talking about it this week, about how will we welcome people and how will we give a sense of ease, because they will be nervous and there will be fear. Noel, what are you doing around communicating that your restaurants and client sites are safe places to be?
Micheline, this may seem very unusual actually, because we compete in the UK against some of the major big companies and some small companies. It's the same as in Ireland with our BaxterStorey business. But in the UK in particular, I think the one good thing that has come out of that is a lady called Kate Nichols, who heads up UK hospitality, has brought a number of the operating bodies and food service caterers together to almost take off their own badge from BaxterStorey or Compass or whoever it is, and to work together to be able to support government and confirm to government that will provide safe places of work from a catering perspective. So we spent a lot of time on calls. I've spent more time talking to more competitors in the last 3 weeks than I did probably in the last 10 years. But we have come together, we've agreed principles between us, we've put those forward in front of UK government via Kate, and it is all about being able to reassure the employee that they are back in a safe place of work. So we've been working really, really hard with that. Now what we have to do, having agreed those principles, is, as Ken said earlier, we are guests in our client premises. So we now have to start working with our clients, as we are doing, to ensure that they will adopt those principles so that they can get their people back to work. And that's everything from technology to the movement of people around the building, the removal of anything where somebody would help themselves. All of those sort of things come into play. And probably, at least for this year, little or no events or hospitality in our business.
Yeah, just picking up on that point, Noel, Garrett Duff, head of culinary with Taste here in Ireland, has commented into us that corporate hospitality will indeed be the last to reopen because of the large scale. They hope to know more about this over the coming months. But the big issue here, I think, is there's a lot of discussion around the 2-metre social distancing. Should it be 1? Should it be 2? We're saying 2 at the moment. And how is this going to affect your restaurant spaces, Ken? Would you like to take a look at that for me?
Well, it's something, as Noel has said, we're working with our clients on in terms of the sort of way in which we're managing not alone the seating areas, but the queuing, the way in which the service is facilitated. No longer will we be looking at self-service. It'll have to be a totally assisted service where there's a queuing mechanism in place. And at the moment, in the places that we have open, we're talking about 1 person per table of 4 in seating. And then we have to manage the number of people that are actually in a facility as well. So does that answer your question? I think, yeah.
We're all struggling with the 2-metre distancing and what that means and how it will affect the service. Noel, do you think that workers will want to come together in traditional restaurant spaces with social distancing, or will they be looking for tailor-made meals delivered to their desks?
I think it'll be a combination of both, Micheline. I think the one thing that the advantage workplace catering will have going forward is, traditionally, if we're in cities or major conurbations, people can choose to eat in or they can go out to the high street. I think although we may have a lower population, a lower customer base of employees because of people working from home, I think it's really up to our sector now to be able to convince as many of those people, in fact the majority of those people, that they are safe in their workplace and they're safe eating in the workplace. And I actually think that'll create a real opportunity for workplace dining, for those who are at the top of their game, to be able to be innovative, deliver food to desk, create safe areas for customers to be able to engage with, make sure you've got good technology, so click and collect, pre-ordering, all of those things. And if you can do that, there is a possibility that we could get back to the volumes that we have all enjoyed on both sides of the water, perhaps over recent years. I think people will be nervous about going. We have a retail arm, Benugo, as you know, and they're on the high street. And back to the 2-metre social distancing rule, honestly, Micheline, we can't do it. There is no point. It would be extremely difficult for our high street stores to be able to operate on that basis. So I think people will be nervous about the high street, for sure.
I was listening to Mary Portas talking about how retail is going to be like a laboratory where we experiment and test things. So no doubt Benugo will be tested in the post-COVID world. I had a nice bit of news in from Tara and Brian Beattie at the Caterers. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. They've reopened 2 of their businesses, one at Newbridge House with takeaway beverages, cakes, confectionery openings. And Tara tells me that the staff have been amazing. They've really put their heads together to work out the best way to get operating. They've missed our customers, our food and each other so much during this time. And 2 great ideas from Tara. She's monitoring sales on an hourly basis and using a questionnaire to see how customers would like to interact with the menu over the coming weeks, and making their little delicious brown bread actually in smaller amounts so that they can sell it, and using their central kitchen as a unique place to practice social distancing. Not the easiest thing to do in a lot of kitchens. Ken, how are your kitchens looking as traditionally chefs work shoulder to shoulder? How's that going to change?
Well, it will. And it really, as we're guests in other people's premises, each physical space in a building is entirely different. In some places, physical distancing is possible and in some not. I mean, I look at some of the industry colleagues here who are reopening CPUs, as you mentioned. where it is possible, and you can plan your production in certain time, and you can have one-way systems and so forth and so on. But in smaller facilities, it's not possible. And we have to be more innovative in managing distancing and mitigate the risk. So I think we're going to have to, in smaller sites, look at innovations such as introduction of visors, as well as partitioning, and be open to all sorts of PPE and hygiene stations and so forth and so on. So we are doing detailed risk assessments for each site. We're looking at the ways in which people are doing things and how can we do those differently to facilitate distancing where possible. But I think we talked about, just going back to the customer confidence piece, a lot of the confidence that our customers will get from what they will get it from what they see. And I think we are going to have to approach reopenings of our sites as a relaunch of a business. We're going to have teaser campaigns. We're going to have to win people over. And as I say, much of the confidence building will be through what people see and how they're spoken to. So, and how our staff are going to deal with those customers. So training is going to be a huge part of that.
Yes, I think our new frontline workers are our stewarding departments who are going to keep us safe and protect the health and safety of your own team as well as your client team. No doubt it's going to have a different look and feel. Noel, how are we going to keep our mindset around hospitality as we put in so many procedures? Do you think it's going to be tricky?
It's going to be tricky, but it's eminently doable. It really is. I think, as hospitality professionals, we are used to change. We really are. We're constantly on the move. We're constantly changing direction depending on what's happened. This one, of course, is pretty major. But people want to learn, they want to engage, they want to do the right thing for the customer. That's why we all came into this sector. So I think the mindset is absolutely there. It is incumbent on us, as Ken said, on us as leaders of businesses, to make sure we're engaging with our teams now when they're out of the business, that we're providing online training when we can, because people will have been out of the business for 8, 9, 10 weeks, maybe it could be 4 months before we get back to any sense of work. And when that happens, we're going to have to make sure that all of our team are match fit and, ready to go in a very, very new working environment. So that level of engagement is going to be really, really critical. And it's a level of engagement which is unique for us because we have to do it over this type of media, rather than normally we'd get a group of people together, we'd have a cup of coffee, we'd have a chat with them, we'd do some fun training, and off we go. Well, that's not possible anymore. So it is a new way of working for all of us, but definitely it's eminently possible. I do think, and Ken mentioned it there, we are absolutely focused on making sure our workplace opens safely, but we mustn't forget that it has to open safely for our workers as well, for the people who trust us and to come to work every day. And that's going to be very, very important.
Talking about new trends, China has reported an increase in meat alternatives as customers look to lead healthier lifestyles post-COVID. And there's an acceleration there towards plant-based food. Do you see this as one of many trends that we'll be looking into as we return to work?
Yeah, most definitely. Do you know, I think at least in the UK, it was there already. Plant-based protein has definitely been on the rise. We ran a program, which I may have mentioned when I was over with you, Micheline, last year. We ran a program called EQ, which is equilibrium, just trying to create some balance, where a lot of the chefs from our academies got together and they were looking at some of our traditional dishes and seeing if it was possible to be less reliant on meat, maybe by reducing some of the mince in a shepherd's pie, for example, and replacing it with lentils, etc. We did some blind tastings with those, and out of 4 sites where we had them and we did blind tastings, nobody noticed a difference. In fact, they like the flavor and taste. So again, I think it's possible. I think people will be very focused on the provenance of the product, something Ireland has fantastic, obviously, local fresh product because of the farming industry there. So that's amazing. The UK is a little bit more disparate in that regard. But in terms of security and feeling safe, I think the customer, our new customer, our old employee, new customer will be really, really engaged in where the products come from, how it was cooked, and does that represent not only value, but part of their sort of balanced weekly, health system, if you will.
We're not at all sure when we're going to get back to mass catering to large numbers, large groups of people gathering together. And of course, we've many experts in that field. And BaxterStorey, Managing Director of Fitzer's Catering, has been in touch with a question for both of you as to how you foresee the management of larger numbers. What are your thoughts on seating arrangements, time and motion, and what menu, you were talking there about menu trends, Noel. Have you any general thoughts on how our banqueting and large conference spaces might come back without our traditional buffet style service?
Ken, do you want to kick off first?
Thanks, Noel. It's like a hospital pass.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
But I think it's going to be very difficult. I do think we're going to, if we're to maintain the 2 meter distance, and there may be some talk of that being reduced to 1 meter as a phasing, it's still going to be very difficult when you're talking about queuing and self-service isn't going to be the same as it was. Buffets aren't going to be the same as they were. It's going to be much more assisted service and served to the table, dare I say, and that's going to pose its own issues for banqueting. And I'm talking off the top of my head, but I do think that if in terms of queuing and banqueting space and then seating arrangements, it's going to be quite impossible for smaller establishments are going to have it very, very difficult. Larger hotels may well have it easier, but we're going to have, if you're going to have a marquee, you're going to have a much larger marquee than you did before, and it's going to increase your costs. So is it going to happen? I wonder.
Noel, you have a number of large venues that are special occasion venues. Have you got plans around that area? Is it far down the road?
We have. I wish I could give Barry able to deliver. I think I support Ken in what he says. I think social distancing or physical distancing, because there's not much social about it, is there? Physical distancing in the large, either corporate or event type market that Fitzers have, etc. I think that's a real task to try and deliver that. And it's not just about the catering element, is it? If you think of at those events, traditionally, people have to queue for the bathrooms. Well, how are you going to get 2 meter social distancing in Portakabin bathrooms? It's going to be exceptionally difficult to do so. I think coming back to some of our sites, if you look at some of the museums we do, maybe through Benugo, the V&A Museum, the Natural History Museum, etc., they traditionally on their busy days could have anything up to between 15 and 20,000 visitors. In the absence of a vaccine, I think that they will be managing queuing times, and they will probably end up with about a quarter of those going through on any one day. Now, there may be some benefit in that because people will be able to spend longer there and perhaps partake in the catering facilities for a little bit longer as well. But ultimately, it will mean a reduction in visitor numbers and therefore potentially in catering as well. And we're just going to have to make sure that we have adjusted our cost base to ensure that we can still do the job very, very well, but in a commercially viable way.
My wonderful colleague, Kieran Moore, has contributed too. Thanks for tuning in, Kieran. Great. Noel, how do you see sustainability in the new world? But I have an add-on for you, because as we balance what I think is sanitation against and with sustainability practices, we're looking at an increased volume of takeaway containers, increased food waste as the grab and go section doesn't sell out. What's your view?
Yeah, thanks a million, Kieran. Another hospital pass. We've spent the last 2 years up until March working with clients about taking packaging and plastics out of their business. And we'd really made some headway with that. Difficult it is, but we had made some headway, significant headway actually. And now it would appear that walking around with an open plate of food, either to your seating area in your cafe or restaurant, or worse still, getting in the lift and going back up to your desk, is an absolute no-go, and that's not going to happen anymore. So I think packaging, into packaging, etc., will play a significant role. You can still get packaging that you can deal with appropriately and make sure the waste streams are in place. I've always been of the view that paper or plastic is not the problem in itself. It's what you do with it is the problem, and how you dispose of it. So I think there'll be huge more reliance on those waste streams, making sure that we are able to put it in a suitable area where it can go to some form of recycling. That's what's going to be key. But it will most definitely have a huge impact. And it has an impact on cost as well, because those things, are expensive. But again, we're working closely with clients on that as we speak. And we're working with some of the manufacturers as to what are the new type of products that we can do, particularly on hot food, Micheline, to be able to retain the temperature and heat of hot food if somebody is taking it back to their desk, which they may deem to be a safer place to eat that product rather than the seating area adjacent to the cafe or restaurant.
Ken, we're also looking at bringing in, I suppose, an awful lot of PPE for our own teams.
And that will vary, but between sites. I mean, if we're social distancing or physical distancing isn't a problem, we're looking at, in general terms, advisors being made available in each of our sites for not alone in the production space, but also as a level of comfort for our customers reaching across the counter. It's very important. Again, it's about the visuals as well as the actual practicalities of it. But just going back on the sustainability piece, I think we've done made a huge amount of progress, and we're nearly there on getting rid of all the single-use plastics. But disposable ware, I think the producers need to step up to the plate a bit more. Certainly, from what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing enough of what is sustainable in terms of what we can use and what people can take away from our dining space. And then we're dealing with the situation where some clients won't actually allow the staff to bring food back to their desks. So where do they go with it if they do eat on site at all? And some places that are in the middle of the cities, they may choose to go out rather than stay in and pay a premium. So that's quite difficult. But equally, in terms of managing costs, we're going to have to be very vigilant in terms of managing our purchasing, because if our volume throughput isn't as great, well, then we can't be purchasing at old levels. We have to manage our menus and how we purchase to support those menus. And then equally look at the way in which we deal with our waste, as well as working with our clients on energy and utilities. I mean, we're going to have to, that's all part of the sustainability piece.
Just had a lovely contribution from somebody we all know, Margot Slattery, Head of Diversity and Inclusion from Sodexo. And she's just raised a question here of inclusion, kind of a comment really, that people with disabilities will have issues with the limited spacing, and perhaps wearing PPE is a problem for people with sight and hearing problems. Also very good comment here about setting up sanitation stations for wheelchair users. Great thoughts, Margot. Thanks for tuning in. can I finish our discussion by just asking you to wrap up with what your top 3 major changes are on your desk right now? Noel, what are your top 3?
I think I've just had to add a 4th one now because of Margot's contribution, because she's absolutely right. And actually, it was discussed only at the back end of last week with some of our clients. It was a really, really good point she raised. We must make sure that we are completely inclusive in that regard. And you can't focus on the 90%. You have to focus on the 100% of people and how they will manage. Top 3 at this moment in time are, in no particular order. 1, continuing to communicate with our teams. I think our teams are finding it really, really difficult being off work for such a length of time. And having that communication with them in a very odd way, a very strange way, this way, is difficult. They're doing great things, quizzes, Zoom calls, Friday evening drinks, all of that sort of stuff. But they are missing being together. They're missing them with their clients and customers. That's the first thing. The second one for us as a business, and I'm sure it's the same for most businesses, is preserving cash. We have to be able to maintain cash so that when it comes to reopen, we are in the best state possible. And that's for every business, but it's no different whether you're a large organization or a small organization. Preservation of cash and not spending it, not having it going out the door is absolutely key. And the third and final one from me is on my list of things to do at the moment is just we all love certainty, and there isn't certainty at the moment, which puts us all in a very, very tricky position. But for me, it's just trying to get some element of forecast around what the balance of this year looks like and what reopening or the reset looks like from January next year. Because, that mechanism will allow us to put our plans together in terms of people, training, development, what that's going to look like as we go forward. So that's probably occupying most of my thoughts. Yeah.
Ken, what's on your desk?
I have 7 on my desk after Noel's, because I was looking in terms of changes for the foreseeable future. I thought reduced throughput in our business and how we manage that. So that goes in with the actual financial piece due to home working in office environments, and then the physical changes that have to be put into our facilities. And I think changes in eating habits, I think people are going to come out of this with changes in eating habits. I think they're going to get used to, they've been, we here, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK, have seen a huge increase in people interested in food and drink. They're going to relate to food slightly differently. They're going to perhaps be more open to having a glass of wine or whatever. And I think they may well be more interested in cooking at home. So that may change the balance as to what they do in the workplace as opposed to how they eat at home and all of that sort of thing. So I think we need to look at our business model and see is it fit for purpose. But all of the above as well with Noel and Margot as well.
So we have longer lists on our desks today. Thank you both for sharing your time with us today. I really found it fascinating. I know that our viewers will. And I really want to say thank you, Ken. Thank you, Noel. Really delighted that you were here with me today. And until next time, bye for now.